The police arrived before I could finish reading the second paragraph. Let me back up. I was 14 years old, standing on the front porch of a house in New Jersey I had never seen before, holding a folded piece of paper I had carried across 2 oceans. The door was open. The man I had been looking for my entire life was standing 3 feet away from me, wearing a blue polo shirt and the expression of someone who had never done anything wrong in his life. Behind him, a woman in a yellow cardigan had her hand pressed against her mouth. He had just told me he did not have a son. I did not cry. I had promised myself, somewhere over the Atlantic, that I would not cry. Instead, I unfolded the birth certificate and I started reading. His name, my name, the hospital in Mumbai, the date, my mother's name, which I said slowly, because I wanted him to hear every syllable of it. That was when the woman behind him gasped. "Is this," she started, and then she could not finish, because the word that came next was too large for the doorway. And that was when his neighbor, who had apparently been watching from behind a curtain for the last 4 minutes, called the police. Some people who have heard this story think I went too far by showing up unannounced. I need you to tell me what you think, because I have been asking myself that question for 11 years, and I still do not have a clean answer. The porch light was motion activated. It had clicked on the moment I stepped up from the driveway, which meant I was standing in a cone of yellow light and he could see my face clearly. I remember noticing that detail because I wanted him to see it. I had his jaw. I had always known that from the one photograph I owned of him, a creased thing that one of the older boys at the orphanage had found tucked inside a book I had been brought in with. I kept that photograph under my mattress for 11 years. I knew his face better than he apparently knew mine. The street behind me was quiet. It was early evening, that particular hour when the light goes purple and everything smells like cut grass and someone's dinner. A car passed slowly. A dog barked once from somewhere down the block and then stopped. The woman in the yellow cardigan, whose name I would later learn was Donna, had been setting the table for dinner when she heard the doorbell. I could see plates through the gap between his shoulder and the doorframe. 3 plates, a salad bowl, a pitcher of iced tea, 3 plates. I held the birth certificate in both hands because I had learned, in the years since I was old enough to understand what had happened to me, that you should always hold important documents in both hands. It keeps them from shaking. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Kavya Mehta, and I was left at the Prabhat Children's Home in Mumbai on a Thursday in October when I was 3 years old. I know it was a Thursday because Sister Ananya, who ran the intake office and who was the closest thing I had to a grandmother for most of my childhood, wrote it in her logbook and showed it to me when I was old enough to ask. She showed me the whole entry. Date, time, the name of the man who brought me in, a description of what I was wearing. A yellow dress with white buttons. I was carrying a stuffed rabbit that was missing one eye. The man who brought me in signed his name as Rajiv Mehta. He listed an address in the Andheri neighborhood of Mumbai. He listed no telephone number. He listed no reason. Under the section marked Additional Notes, Sister Ananya had written in her careful handwriting, Father stated mother is deceased. Father unable to provide care at this time. Unable to provide care at this time. I read that phrase so many times over the years that it stopped meaning anything. It became just a shape. 6 words that were supposed to explain 11 years. The Prabhat Children's Home was not a bad place. I want to be clear about that because I have told versions of this story to people who immediately picture something from a Victorian novel, and it was not that. It was crowded and underfunded and the food was repetitive, but Sister Ananya was a genuinely good woman, and there were other children who became something like family, and I was educated and fed and I was not abused. I was simply left. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being left by someone who is still alive somewhere in the world. It is different from grief. Grief has an endpoint. Being left does not. I was a quiet child. The other kids at Prabhat called me library girl because I spent most of my free hours in the small room off the main hallway where they kept donated books, reading anything I could get my hands on. I read in Hindi and in English with equal speed by the time I was 8. Sister Ananya used to tell visitors that I was her star student, and I understood even then that she was trying to make me appealing, trying to increase my chances of being adopted, and I was grateful to her for it even though the adoption never came. When I was 9, a couple came to visit the home. They were from Pune, both of them teachers, and they spent 2 hours talking to different children and playing a game in the courtyard. I watched them from the library window. They were kind. You could see it in how they moved, how they laughed, how the woman crouched down to be at eye level with the younger children. When they left, Sister Ananya told me they had chosen a 4-year-old boy named Dinesh. I went back to the library and I read for 3 hours straight without absorbing a single word. That was the only time I cried about it. One afternoon. 3 hours. Then I made a decision that I have thought about many times since, because I am not entirely sure a 9-year-old should have to make a decision like this, but I made it anyway. I decided that if no one was coming for me, I would go find the person who was supposed to have come. I would find my father. I started with what I had. The name in Sister Ananya's logbook. The address in Andhuri that turned out to be a building that had been demolished in 2007. The photograph. And a detail that Sister Ananya mentioned once, almost in passing, when I was 11 years old and had been asking her questions with an intensity that probably alarmed her. She told me that the man who had brought me in had mentioned, while filling out the paperwork, that he was planning to go to America. She did not know where in America. She did not know why. She had simply noted it and moved on because she had 42 children to care for, and a single father's offhand remark was not something she had reason to remember in detail. But I remembered it. I wrote it down in the small notebook I kept hidden in my mattress alongside the photograph. Father going to America, date of entry, my yellow dress, my rabbit with one eye. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, you already know what that particular kind of quiet feels like. It is not emptiness. It is a specific, pressurized quiet, the kind that builds into something over years if you are careful with it. I was careful with it. By the time I was 12, I had developed what I privately called my investigation. This is not as dramatic as it sounds. I was a child in an orphanage with limited access to the internet, which in those years meant the shared computer in the administrative office that we were allowed to use for 1 hour per week for educational purposes. I used my hour carefully. I learned how to search for people. I learned what kinds of records were public and what kinds were not. I learned that there were databases, some of them accessible without payment, that tracked immigration and naturalization records. I learned the difference between a green card and a citizenship application. I learned a great deal about the American immigration system for a 12-year-old girl in Mumbai who had no personal reason to care about it except the most personal reason in the world. The other children in my dormitory thought I was using my computer hour to look at television shows. I let them think this because it was easier than explaining. My breakthrough came when I was 13. I had been searching variations of the name Rajiv Mehta in combination with American city names for over a year, which is as tedious as it sounds, when I found a comment on a community forum for Indian immigrants in New Jersey. The comment was from an account with the username R. Mehta. Mumbai, posted 4 years earlier, asking for recommendations for a good accountant who understood both American and Indian tax obligations. It was a single sentence. But the username was specific enough, and the location tag said Central New Jersey, and something in my chest went very still in the way it does when you have been looking for something for a long time and you suddenly recognize the shape of it. I did not tell Sister Ananya what I had found. I was not trying to keep secrets from her. I simply understood, in the way that children who have had to manage their own emotional lives often understand things earlier than they should, that if I told an adult, the adult would try to help, and the help would involve official channels, and official channels would involve explanations and delays and the possibility that he would be warned I was coming. I did not want him warned. I wanted to see his face when he opened the door. I spent the next 8 months being very careful. I found, through a combination of the forum username and a name search tool I had located through one of the older orphanage boys who was interested in computers, a Rajiv Mehta in a town called Edison, New Jersey. I found a street address. I wrote it in my notebook 3 times, in case I lost the notebook because I had already memorized it, but I wrote it 3 times anyway. I turned 14 in January. The woman from the American consulate, who came to Prabhat twice a year to process paperwork for children who were being considered for international adoption, had visited in March. Her name was Ms. Ferreira, and she was brisk and competent and not particularly warm, but she was efficient, and when I approached her quietly after the formal session and explained my situation with the specific, detailed calmness that I had been practicing for 2 years, she looked at me for a long moment and then asked me to sit down. I sat down. I laid out everything I had. The logbook entry, which Sister Ananya had allowed me to photograph with a borrowed phone. The forum comment. The address search. The birth certificate, which Sister Ananya kept in the home's official records and which I had formally requested a copy of 3 weeks earlier by submitting a written request to the administrative office because I had looked up the process and followed it precisely. I put everything on the table in the order in which I had found it, and I explained my methodology without editorializing, and I waited. Ms. Ferreira read everything twice. She asked me 4 clarifying questions. Then she took off her glasses and pressed the bridge of her nose and said quietly, "How long have you been working on this?" "About 2 years," I said. "Systematically. Before that, I was just thinking about it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. I do not know who she called. I sat very still and looked at the wall and did not allow myself to hope too specifically, because I had learned that specific hope is more painful than general hope when it does not work out. 3 weeks later, with assistance that I have never fully understood the mechanics of, but that I suspect involved Ms. Ferreira and Sister Ananya, and at least one person from a legal aid organization in Mumbai, I had a passport, a plane ticket, and a confirmed address in Edison, New Jersey. Sister Ananya walked me to the gate at the airport. She held both of my hands and told me I was the sharpest child she had ever known, which I believed was true, and then she told me that no matter what happened when I got there, I had already proven something important. I asked her what. She said I had proven that I was not a person who could be simply left. I thought about that on the plane for 9 hours. The flight landed at Newark at 7:14 in the evening on a Wednesday in April. A volunteer from a resettlement organization met me at arrivals, a young man named Suresh who worked with the legal aid group and who had been arranged by Ms. Ferreira or Sister Ananya or someone in the chain I did not fully understand. He drove me to a small guest house in Edison that was operated by a charitable organization. A clean, quiet place with a shared bathroom and a window that looked onto a parking lot. I ate rice and dal that a woman named Auntie Priya made in the communal kitchen, and then I sat on the edge of the bed in the small room and I took out my notebook and I looked at the address I had written 3 times and I planned what I was going to say. I was not afraid. That is the thing I remember most clearly about that night. I expected to be afraid, and I was not. I was something else, something that I still do not have a precise word for. It was like the feeling of finally sitting down after carrying something heavy for a very long time. The next evening, Suresh drove me to the address. He offered to come to the door with me. I said no. He said he would wait in the car. I walked up the driveway alone, in the purple early evening light, past a mailbox with the name Mehta on it in stick-on letters, past a flower bed with yellow marigolds that I noticed, and then deliberately stopped noticing because the detail was too much, and I rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps. The door opened. He was taller than I expected. The photograph was old. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and he was wearing a blue polo shirt, and he looked at me with the polite blankness of someone who does not recognize the person at his door, and something in that blankness told me immediately, with a certainty that landed in my body like a stone dropping into water, that he knew exactly who I was. "Can I help you?" he said. His voice was lower than I had imagined it. I had imagined his voice many times. "My name is Kavya," I said. "Kavya Mehta, you left me at the Prabhat Children's Home in Mumbai on a Thursday in October when I was 3 years old." The blankness on his face did not shift, it solidified. "I don't have a son," he said. "A daughter, I thought. You don't have a daughter." He had not even remembered to get the gender right. I did not correct him. I unfolded the birth certificate with both hands, smoothing the crease that ran down the center, and I began to read aloud. The gasp from somewhere behind him was the sound of a woman who had just understood that her entire life contained a room she had never been shown. And then, from somewhere down the street, the sound of a siren. The siren was not for me. It was an ambulance, moving fast down the main road 2 blocks over, and it passed without slowing, its sound swelling and then dissolving into the evening like something that had never quite arrived. But in the 3 seconds between when I heard it and when I understood it was not stopping, I watched Rajiv Mehta's face do something that told me everything I needed to know about the next phase of my life. He did not look relieved. He looked calculating. He was already thinking about what came next, which meant he was a man who, when confronted with something he had buried, did not collapse. He strategized. I had not expected that. I had prepared for denial, for anger, for tears, for the door being slammed. I had not fully prepared for the cool, assessing look of someone deciding which version of this story he could still control. Donna had moved. She was no longer behind him. She had stepped to the side and was gripping the edge of the open door with one hand, and she was looking at me with an expression that was not anger and not pity, but something rower than both. The look of a person who has just discovered that the house they have been living in was built on ground they were never shown a map of. Suresh was still in the car at the end of the driveway. I could see the shape of him in my peripheral vision without turning. I had told him not to come to the door, and he had honored that, and I was grateful for it, because what happened in the next 4 minutes was something I needed to happen without a witness at my elbow. Rajiv Mehta looked at the birth certificate in my hands. Then he looked at my face. Then he looked past me at the car in his driveway. "You should come inside," he said. His voice was careful and neutral, the voice of a man who had decided that containment was still possible. I did not move. "I am fine here." Donna made a sound, not quite a word, and he turned to look at her, and something passed between them that I was not meant to see and saw anyway. It was the look of two people rapidly revising the story they shared. "Please," Donna said, and this one was directed at me, not at him, and her voice was nothing like his. It had fractures in it. "Please come in." I came in. I sat on the edge of a couch in a living room with cream-colored walls and a rug I did not look at closely, and a side table with a framed photograph on it that I also did not look at closely, because I had come here with a specific purpose, and being derailed by what might be in that photograph was not something I could afford. Rajiv Mehta sat in the chair across from me. Donna stood in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, arms crossed over her yellow cardigan, watching him. What happened in that room over the next hour is a longer story than the doorstep moment, and it is the story that actually matters, though it did not feel that way at the time. At the time, it felt like watching someone negotiate the terms of a surrender they had not yet admitted was a surrender. He confirmed he was my father. He did not apologize. He said my mother had died when I was 2, which I already knew, and that he had been, as he put it, in a very difficult place, which I did not respond to. He said he had always intended to come back for me. I looked at him steadily when he said this, and he looked away first. He said he had built a life here with Donna, and that they had a daughter who was 8 years old and who was currently at a friend's house and whose name was Priya. Priya. He had named his second daughter Priya. I sat with that information very quietly for a moment, and then I set it aside, because I had not come to Edison, New Jersey, to have feelings about baby names. I had come to be seen. To make him say, out loud with a witness, that I existed. I had the birth certificate. I had his signature on it in my father's handwriting, which I had studied for 11 years from a single photograph taken at the time of my birth that Sister Ananya had kept in my file. I had what I needed. I did not ask him for anything that evening. This confused him, I could see it. He had been bracing for a demand for money, for something he could negotiate or refuse or offer as settlement. When I stood up after an hour and picked up my birth certificate and told him I was glad to have met him and that I would be in touch, his face did something complicated and unresolved, and he opened his mouth once and closed it again. Donna walked me to the door. In the entryway, with her hand on the latch, she looked at me directly and said, quietly and without any performance in it, "How long were you there? At the home?" 11 years, I said. She held the door open for me and did not say anything else, and I walked back down the driveway to Suresh's car, and I got in, and I looked straight through the windshield at the street ahead. "How did it go?" Suresh asked. "It went," I said. I was 14 years old, and I had just knocked on the door of a past that had spent 11 years pretending I did not exist. I had no legal standing in this country. I was here on a temporary humanitarian visa arranged through a chain of people whose full names I did not know. I had no money of my own beyond what Ms. Ferreira's organization had provided for the trip. I had no plan beyond finding him, which I had now done. What I did next took 20 years. I am 34 now. The woman who went back to Mumbai after that visit, who sat in the Prabhat dormitory for the remaining months before she aged out of the system, and read everything she could find about immigration law and educational scholarships, and the specific, narrow pathways that exist for people who have no family, no money, and no country that considers them a priority. That woman is the reason I was able to walk back up that same driveway 2 weeks ago. I am going to tell you what I built in those 20 years, but I am going to tell it the way it actually happened, which is not in a straight line and not without cost, and which involves 3 moments where I came very close to being found out before I was ready. I left Prabhat officially at 16, which was the age at which the Indian government considered children in residential care old enough to transition to independence programs. Sister Ananya had, through connections I did not fully understand until I was much older, arranged for me to enter a bridging program in Pune run by an NGO that provided housing and accelerated education to aged-out children. The program was underfunded and overstretched, but it had one thing that changed everything: a director named Bhaskar Iyer, who had a wall of bookshelves and the habit of giving books to young people he thought were worth the investment. He gave me 4 books in the 2 years I was in Pune. 3 of them were on economics, and 1 of them was on contract law. I read all 4 twice. When I was 18, I got a partial scholarship to a business college in Hyderabad. I supplemented it by tutoring secondary students in English and mathematics, which I did 6 evenings a week for 3 years without missing a session. Because I had understood by then that the difference between where I was and where I needed to be was entirely a function of how many hours I was willing to spend that other people were not. I graduated with a degree in business administration and a grade point average that my department head described as the highest she had seen in 9 years, though she said it in the tone of someone slightly annoyed by it. I took my first job at a logistics company in Hyderabad. The salary was modest. The work was repetitive. I did it for 2 years, learning everything I could about supply chain operations and vendor contracts, and then I moved to a consulting firm in Mumbai that worked with mid-sized manufacturers on process efficiency. This is where it started. Not with money, at first, with a contact. My supervisor at the consulting firm was a woman named Deepa Kulkarni, who was precise and unsentimental, and who recognized, within the first 3 months, that I had a specific ability to look at the internal structure of a struggling business and locate exactly where the damage was. She described it once as diagnostic. She put me on her most difficult accounts. When I was 24, I went with her to a client meeting in Singapore that was supposed to be a formality and turned into a 4-hour negotiation, and I was the one who closed it. Deepa shook my hand afterward and told me I needed to stop working for other people. I thought about that for a year. Then I started working toward it. The consulting practice I built was small by design. I did not want visibility. I wanted stability and leverage. I worked with manufacturing and logistics companies in India and Southeast Asia, helping them restructure operations and renegotiate supplier contracts. By the time I was 28, I had 6 long-term clients: an attorney in Mumbai named Arjun Shetty, who had reviewed every contract I had ever signed, and who charged me rates I could barely afford in the early years and who was worth every rupee, and a savings position that would have surprised the people who knew me in Pune. I also had, by this point, a permanent resident visa for the United States. I had applied for it 3 years after my visit to Edison, through the same legal aid channels that had facilitated the original trip. And then I had reapplied, and appealed, and reapplied again, which took the better part of 4 years and required the help of an immigration attorney in New Jersey named Colleen Acaffer, who operated out of a small office in Newark, and who was the most tenacious woman I had ever encountered in a professional context. When the approval finally came through, she called me at 6 in the morning Mumbai time, which was her mid-afternoon, and said simply, "We got it. Don't waste it." I did not waste it. The first close call happened on a video call. I had been in regular contact with Donna since the night on the porch. Not with Rajiv. He had retreated, as I had suspected he would, into a posture of managed distance. The kind of distance that lets a person tell themselves they are maintaining a relationship, while actually doing the minimum required to prevent a confrontation. But Donna called me every few months, and I took those calls because Donna was not the person I was preparing for, and because she had a daughter named Priya who was my half-sister. And I had decided, very deliberately, that Priya was not going to grow up the way I had grown up if I had any influence over it. I was 29 when Donna called me in late November and mentioned, in the careful way she had developed for navigating conversations that involved her husband, that Rajiv had been asking about me. Specifically, he had been asking about my work. "He wants to know what you do," she said. I was at my desk in Mumbai, reviewing a contract amendment. I set down my pen. "What did you tell him?" I told him I didn't know the details. A pause. "He seems worried." About what I did not ask, because I already knew. He was a man who had spent 25 years managing a secret, and the secret had shown up at his door with documentation and had then, inexplicably, not demanded anything. That inexplicable quality was what worried him. People who don't demand something are usually waiting for the right moment to demand something larger. He was not entirely wrong. "Tell him I work in business consulting," I said. "Which is true." He asked if you were doing well financially. I looked at the contract on my desk. It was for a retainer with a textile manufacturer in Surat, and the annual figure was larger than Rajiv Mehta's salary, which I knew because Donna had mentioned what he earned during a different conversation. In passing, the way people mention things they assume are impressive. "Tell him I'm fine," I said. "I don't need anything from him." That last part was entirely true, and also the most strategic thing I had said in months. That evening, I called Arjun Shetty and told him to begin preliminary research on inheritance and paternity rights under New Jersey family law. He asked me if the timeline had changed. I told him not yet. He said he would have a memo ready within 3 weeks, and he did, because Arjun was the kind of attorney who treated a memo request as a personal challenge. The second close call happened in person, in Edison, which I had begun visiting once a year. I had made the deliberate choice to be present in their lives in a low-frequency, non-threatening way. I came for Priya's birthday each year, because Donna had asked me to, and because I had an interest in Priya that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with the fact that she was a small person growing up in a house with a secret that she did not know existed, and I thought someone should be watching out for her. She was 12 by this visit, gap-toothed and curious and prone to asking questions that made Rajiv go very still. It was a Saturday afternoon in the backyard. Donna had made too much food, which she always did, and Priya's school friends had gone home, and it was just the 4 of us at the outdoor table. Rajiv had been drinking iced tea and maintaining the specific, careful pleasantness he deployed in my presence. And then Priya, who had been given a new phone for her birthday and was already fluent in using it, looked up from the screen and said, "Diddy, I looked you up online." "Why don't you have a LinkedIn?" The table went quiet. Rajiv put down his glass. Slowly, I looked at Priya with complete calm. "Because I find it brings in the wrong kind of attention," I said. "I work mostly through referrals. But you have a company, it didn't come up when I searched. My company's name is not the same as my name." I reached over and touched the edge of her new phone lightly. "Did you find anything interesting?" She was 12 and easily redirected by attention. "I found your old college," she said. "In Hyderabad, they have a picture of the graduating class." "Terrible photograph," I said. I blinked. She laughed. Rajiv picked up his glass again. Donna refilled everyone's water with the focused attention of someone who needed something to do with her hands. That night, in the guest house where I always stayed when I visited Edison, I called Colleen Ackeffer. I told her we needed to discuss the timeline for the legal filing. She had been expecting this conversation for 2 years. "How soon?" she asked. "I want everything in place within 18 months, I said. "Full documentation, paternity, inheritance standing, the trust structure. Everything Arjun has been preparing, I want it ready to execute." A pause. "That's aggressive." "I know. I'll need the complete documentation package from Arjun's office by the end of January." "You'll have it," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, caveat. "Are you sure about the scope of this?" I thought about the photograph on the side table in their living room that I had deliberately not looked at on the night I arrived at age 14. I had looked at it eventually on a later visit. It was a family portrait. Rajiv, Donna, Priya, taken, from the look of it, about 5 years after he had left me in Mumbai. "Yes," I said, "I'm sure." The third close call was the one that nearly ended everything. I had been staying in the United States for 4 months by then, operating out of a short-term apartment in Jersey City while I established the American arm of my consulting practice. This had been the plan for 3 years: move the operational center of my work to the U.S., establish legal residency properly, build the American client base, and do it all under a business name that Rajiv Mehta, who was not a man who read trade publications, would not encounter unless he was specifically looking. He was specifically looking. I found out through Donna, who did not realize she was telling me anything significant. She mentioned, during a call in February, that Rajiv had hired a private investigator. She mentioned it the way you mention weather. She said he had been doing some research and had spoken to someone, and I had to ask 2 follow-up questions in a register of complete casualness to establish that the someone was, in fact, a professional, and that the research was specifically about me. I sat with this for 48 hours. I did not call Arjun or Colleen immediately because I needed to think without the noise of other people's reactions. He was scared. That was the thing under the thing. A man who is not scared does not spend money on a private investigator to look into a woman who has never asked him for anything. He was scared because I had been patient, and patience, in his experience, was a prelude to something. He was right. I called Arjun on a Thursday morning. I told him what Donna had said. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "How much does the investigator likely know?" "My business name, probably my turnover roughly, possibly my address here. And the filing? Not yet. The legal filing that established my claim under New Jersey paternity and inheritance law had not yet been submitted. It was ready. It had been ready for 6 weeks, sitting in Colleen's office in a folder with every supporting document organized by date and category. "Do you want to move the timeline up?" Arjun asked. I looked out the window of my Jersey City apartment at the skyline across the water. From this angle, on a clear day, you could see a long way. "No," I said. "If he's hiring investigators, he knows something is coming. Moving faster doesn't change that. I want it done right." Then I'd suggest we stop delaying on the one thing we've been delaying on. He meant the direct conversation with Donna. The one I had been putting off for 2 years because it was the most human part of all of this and therefore the hardest. Not the legal part, not the financial structure, not the documents. Telling Donna, clearly and with full disclosure, what I had been building and why, before she heard it from her husband's investigator or from a court filing. She deserved that. I had always known she deserved that. I drove to Edison the following Saturday. Donna opened the door before I reached the porch. She had seen my car from the window. Priya was at a gymnastics class. Rajiv was at the hardware store. We had, by what felt like deliberate arrangement on Donna's part, though she had not told me she planned it that way, the house entirely to ourselves. She had made tea. She set 2 cups on the kitchen table and sat down across from me, and she looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for a specific conversation for a long time and is relieved it is finally happening. "Tell me," she said, so I did. I told her everything. The full scope of what I had built and what I intended to do with it. Not to punish Rajiv, I told her, and I meant it when I said it. But because I had a legal standing in this family that had been denied since before I could form memories, and because Priya had a sister who intended to be acknowledged as one, and because I was 33 years old and I was done being a secret. Donna listened without interrupting. She held her tea with both hands and did not drink it and listened to all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she set her cup down with a care that suggested she was working very hard to control something. "Does he know the scope of it?" she asked. "He knows something is coming. He doesn't know what." Another silence. "Are you going to destroy him?" I thought about that carefully. "I'm going to make him acknowledge me." What that costs him depends on what he decides to do when the filing lands. She looked at her hands, then she looked at me. "I knew," she said. "Not everything, but I knew more than he thinks I knew. I found the adoption paperwork from the Prabet home in a box in the garage about 3 years after we married. He said it was a child he had sponsored. I didn't believe him, but she stopped, pressed her lips together. I didn't push." "I know," I said. "I should have." "Yes." It was not a comfortable conversation, and I did not try to make it comfortable, because Donna was a grown woman who had made choices, and she knew that, and performing comfort would have been an insult to her intelligence. When I left that afternoon, she walked me to the car the same way she had walked me to the door 20 years earlier, and at the end of the driveway she said, "Whatever happens, Priya knows you're her sister. I told her 6 months ago." I stopped walking. "She wanted to know why you came to every birthday," Donna said. "She's 14. She's not a child who accepts vague answers anymore." "What did she say when you told her?" Donna almost smiled. It was a complicated almost. She said, "I knew it. She looks like Baba around the eyes." I got in my car. I drove to Jersey City. I called Colleen Ackhaffer from the parking garage and told her to submit the filing on Monday morning. "Everything is already in order," Colleen said. "I've been ready for this call for 6 weeks." "I know, Monday." I ended the call and sat in the car for a moment in the underground quiet of the parking garage. Then I took out my phone and I sent Rajiv Mehta a message. 6 words. I had written it in my notebook years ago, back when I still carried the same notebook, and I had memorized it and then deliberately never sent it until I had everything in place. The message said, "We need to meet. I'll come to you." He read it within 4 minutes. He did not respond. The filing landed on his attorney's desk at 9:17 on a Monday morning, and by noon, Rajiv Mehta knew the exact legal scope of what I had built in the years since I had stood on his porch at 14 years old with a birth certificate and a question he had answered with a lie. By Thursday, his attorney had called Colleen 3 times. By Friday, the number Colleen quoted in response to the first settlement inquiry made his attorney go very quiet on the other end of the line for a long time. And on Saturday morning, my phone rang, and it was not an attorney. It was Rajiv Mehta's personal number, calling for the first time in 20 years of careful distance, and I looked at it ringing in my hand, and I thought about a yellow dress with white buttons, and a rabbit missing one eye, and a Thursday in October, and then I picked up. I want to know if you would have said what I said next, because I have been thinking about it every day for 2 weeks, and I still do not have a clean answer about whether I was right or whether I was something else entirely. He called on a Saturday morning. I answered on the third ring. Kavya. His voice was different from every other time I had heard it. The careful pleasantness was gone. What was underneath it was not warmth. It was a kind of exhausted directness, the voice of a man who had run out of the energy required to perform normalcy. My attorney says you have filed something. Yes. He says the scope of it is, he stopped, started again. He says it's significant. It is. A long pause. Outside my window, someone was walking a dog along the waterfront path, a large golden dog that was pulling hard against the leash, and I watched it for a moment. What do you want? Rajiv asked. I had thought about this question for 20 years. I had written answers to it in notebooks. I had rehearsed versions of it in hotel rooms and airplane seats and the small dormitory room at Prabhat, where I had spent 11 years figuring out who I was going to be when someone finally asked me. I want what's mine, I said. Legally, I want my name in the places my name belongs, and I want Priya to know she has a sister. She already does, apparently. Donna told her. Another pause, longer this time. Donna told her 6 months ago, he said, and there was something in his voice that was not quite anger and not quite grief, something in between, the sound of a man discovering that the containment he had maintained for decades had been quietly unwinding from the inside. I know. Donna told me. You knew and you didn't tell me. Rajiv. I said his name the same way I had said it for 20 years, levelly, without the weight of father or the distance of sir. There are quite a few things I've known for quite a while that I haven't told you. That's what the filing is about. He was quiet for a long time. Then, can we handle this without going to court? I had expected this question too. That depends entirely on you. My attorney says, I know what your attorney says. He's been calling Colleen 3 times a day since Monday. I want you to hear this from me directly, not through attorneys. I paused. There is a family dinner at Donna's brother's house in 2 weeks, Noel's house. I know because Donna invited me 3 weeks ago. I think we should all be in the same room. The silence after that was the most informative silence of the entire conversation. It told me that he had not known Donna had invited me. It told me that Donna was moving on her own timeline now, not his. And it told me that the idea of all of us in the same room was the thing he feared most, which meant it was precisely the right venue. Kavya, 2 weeks, I said. I'll be there. You can decide what you want to do with that. I ended the call. Donna's brother was a man named Noel Farrow, who was 51 years old and who had known about me. Donna had once let slip for at least 4 years. He had met me twice at Priya's birthday gatherings, and had been, both times, carefully and deliberately normal with me, in the way that people are normal when they have been briefed on a situation and instructed to act as if it is not a situation. He was a large, loud man who grilled fish on an outdoor grill and told the same 3 stories about his college years in rotation, and who I had correctly identified early on as the kind of person who follows the direction of the room rather than setting it. He would not intervene in anything. He would watch and wait to see which way things landed and adjust accordingly. His wife, Gemma, was a different matter. Gemma Farrow was small and sharp and operated socially with the precision of someone who had decided long ago that family gatherings were a form of competitive sport. She had met me once, at Priya's 12th birthday, and had asked me 3 questions that were structured as pleasantries and were actually an assessment. She had assessed me and concluded, I think, that I was either harmless or containable, and she had moved on. She would not be expecting what was coming. That was fine. I was not coming for Gemma. I called Colleen on Sunday. I told her to prepare the summary document, the version that condensed the full legal filing into 8 pages of plain language that a person without a law degree could read and understand in one sitting. She asked if I wanted it formal or plain. Plain, I said. I want him to be able to read it himself without his attorney translating. I'll have it done by Wednesday, she paused. Caveat, is there going to be a scene? There's going to be a conversation. Those are sometimes the same thing. I know. She had the document to me by Tuesday evening, which was one day early, because Colleen was the kind of attorney who treated every deadline as a personal inadequacy to be outperformed. I read it twice. It was 8 pages, and it was clear and it was precise. And the number on page 4, the total figure that represented the accumulated value of what I was claiming under New Jersey inheritance and paternity law given Rajiv Mehta's documented assets, was a number that I had known for 3 months, and that still, when I read it in Colleen's clean font on a Tuesday evening, made me sit very still for a moment. Not because of the number itself, because of what the number represented. 31 years of being a person who did not officially exist in a family that had continued without her. I put the document in a folder. I put the folder in my bag. I went to bed. The dinner was on a Saturday. The first Saturday in March. Noelle and Gemma's house was a colonial in South Brunswick, 40 minutes from Edison, with a wide driveway and a basketball hoop that nobody used and a backyard that smelled like charcoal from about 3 in the afternoon onward. I had been there once before, 2 summers ago, for a July 4th gathering to which Donna had invited me, and which Rajiv had not known I was attending until I walked in, and which had passed without incident because Rajiv was a man who could maintain a performance under pressure when the audience was large enough. Tonight the audience was smaller. Noelle and Gemma. Their son Tobias, who was 17 and largely indifferent to adult drama in the way that 17-year-olds are. Donna's college friend Adiz, who visited from Philadelphia twice a year and who had known Donna for 26 years and who was, by Donna's own description, the person who had convinced her to finally tell Priya the truth about me. And Priya, and Rajiv, and me. I arrived at 6:45. Donna opened the door. We looked at each other for a moment, and something passed between us that was not a strategy and not a plan, but simply the acknowledgement that we had both been building toward this evening for different lengths of time and for different reasons, and that we were both ready. He got here at 6, she said quietly. He's been in the backyard with Noelle for 40 minutes. Is he drinking? 2 beers, he's careful. I nodded. I went inside. Priya was in the living room on the couch, her phone face down on the cushion beside her, which meant she had been told to put it away, which meant Donna had prepared her for the evening in some way. She was 14 now and taller than she had been at her birthday, and when she looked up and saw me, she did something that I had not prepared for. She got up from the couch and crossed the room and hugged me. Not the careful, Priya being polite hug of previous visits. A real one. Hi, Diddy, she said. Hi, I said, and for a moment I had to focus very hard on something neutral, the lamp in the corner, a picture on the wall, anything, because Priya was 14 and she had my father's jaw and she had just called me Diddy and I needed to be steady for what was coming. Adiz was in the kitchen helping Gemma with something, and she looked up when I came through and gave me the kind of direct nod that told me Donna had told her everything. Not recently. Some time ago. Adiz had the face of a woman who had been sitting with a complicated truth for a while and had made her peace with her position in it. Noelle came in from the backyard to get another beer and stopped when he saw me. Kavya, good, good. He was doing the careful, normal thing. Rajiv said you might be joining us. Rajiv invited her, Donna said, from behind me, and the slight precision of that correction, the way it quietly closed a door on the version of events where my presence was uncertain, told me that Donna had been thinking about the framing of this evening very carefully. Noelle took his beer and went back outside. I went into the kitchen and offered to help with something. Gemma handed me a bowl of salad to dress, which I did, and she watched me from the corner of her eye with the expression of someone running a calculation she had not yet completed. She had not greeted me. She would not tonight. Gemma operated by establishing early who held the social standing in a room, and she had not yet determined whether I was a threat or an asset, and until she did, she would observe. That was fine. Gemma was not the person I was here for. Rajiv came in from the backyard at 7:15 when Donna called everyone to the table. He saw me at the kitchen counter. Something crossed his face that was not surprise and was not welcome. It was the look of a man who had been told something was coming and who has spent 2 weeks trying to convince himself it will be manageable and who is now, for the first time, not entirely convinced. He sat at the far end of the table. I sat 3 seats away, across from Priya. Adiz sat beside me. Noelle was at the head. Gemma and Tobias filled the other side. Donna sat at the opposite head from Noelle, which put her equidistant between me and Rajiv, which I suspected was not accidental. The first 20 minutes were the performance of a normal dinner. Food was passed. Noelle told one of his 3 college stories. Tobias ate steadily and said almost nothing. Priya asked me about Mumbai because she had told me at her last birthday that she wanted to visit one day, and I described the city to her in the way that you describe a place to someone who is going to love it. Rajiv was quiet. He ate. He answered direct questions in the minimal way of a man conserving something. Gemma broke the performance first, though I do not think she intended to. She was refilling the bread basket when she said, to the table generally but with her eyes on me, "So Kavya, Donna tells me you're in consulting. What kind?" "Operations and supply chain," I said, "primarily manufacturing clients. And you're based in the US now?" "Jersey City, yes, going on 7 months." Gemma set the bread basket down. It must have been difficult, building a career without the family support system. Most people have that foundation. She smiled when she said it, the particular smile of a woman who is being cruel inside the structure of a compliment and knows you know it and is daring you to call it. I looked at her for a moment. I had met women like Gemma at every stage of my life. They were never the main event. They were the temperature of the room, and right now Gemma was trying to set the temperature to something that made me smaller. "I found it clarifying," I said. "When you build something alone, you know exactly what it's worth." Adiz, beside me, picked up her glass and took a drink without comment. Priya was looking between me and Gemma with the focused attention of a 14-year-old who has correctly identified that something is happening. Rajiv was looking at his plate. "That's one way to think about it," Gemma said. "It's the accurate way," I said pleasantly. Noelle laughed, a big sound that had nothing in it except his need to diffuse, and launched into a story about a colleague at his firm, and the temperature of the table shifted slightly, and the first exchange was over. But Rajiv had looked up from his plate when I said that last line, and what was on his face was not the performance of careful pleasantness. It was assessment. He was seeing, maybe for the first time in a way that registered fully, that I was not going to be managed tonight. Good. I needed him to see that before anything else happened. It was Priya, 40 minutes later, who opened the door without knowing she was opening it. She had been telling Adiz about her school's debate team, which she had just joined, and she was describing the format of competition debates with the enthusiastic specificity of a 14-year-old who has recently discovered a thing she is good at, and she said, in the middle of it, "Diddy does something kind of like that, right? Like arguing for what you're owed." The table did not go silent. 3 conversations continued at slightly reduced volume. Tobias kept eating. But something shifted in the quality of the air in the way it does when a question has landed that everyone at the table knows is larger than it appears. Rajiv set down his fork. I looked at Priya. "In a way," I said, "I make sure contracts say what they're supposed to say, and that people honor what they agreed to." "That's important," Priya said, with the certainty of someone 14 stating a moral position they have not yet had reason to test. "It is," I said. Rajiv picked up his fork again. He cut something on his plate. Then, without looking at me, "Priya, why don't you and Tobias clear some of these dishes?" It was the first time he had spoken directly in several minutes, and the way he said it, quietly and with a particular kind of finality, was the tone of a man trying to root a conversation before it reached a destination he could not control. Priya, to her credit, did not move immediately. She looked at her father and then at me, and I gave her the slightest nod, the kind that is small enough to be invisible to everyone except the person it's meant for, and she picked up 2 plates and carried them to the kitchen, and Tobias followed with the resigned compliance of a teenager who has learned that departing a room when adults get quiet is generally wise. Noelle cleared his throat. "Anyone want more of the Rajiv?" Donna's voice, from her end of the table. Calm, the way a woman is calm when she has decided something and the deciding is already done. Kavya has something she'd like to discuss with the family. Gemma looked at Donna with an expression that had a lot of information in it, most of it surprised that Donna was the one who had said that. Noelle put down the serving spoon. Rajiv looked at Donna for a long time, then he looked at me. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said. "Because the people at this table are the people who have been in this family while I was not. I think they deserve to understand what's been happening." "Nothing has been happening." His voice was tight. "There is a legal matter being handled by attorneys and it will be resolved through. There is a 31-year-old woman sitting at your brother-in-law's dinner table who has a birth certificate with your signature on it," I said. That's what's been happening. Gemma made a sound. Small, involuntary. Noel had gone very still in the particular way of a man who has realized, too late, that he should have asked more questions 2 years ago. Adiz was watching me. Her posture had shifted, subtly, the way a person's posture shifts when they move from observer to witness. I reached under the table and took the folder from my bag. I put it on the table in front of me, not opening it yet, just placing it. I want to tell you something first, I said, speaking to the table but looking at Rajiv. Before the documents, because the documents are going to say things clearly that I want you to hear from me first. He looked at the folder. Kavya, I was 3 years old, I said. I don't tell you this to make you feel a specific thing. I tell you because it's the beginning of the story and you should hear it stated plainly in a room full of people who know you. You took me to the Prabhat Children's Home in Mumbai on a Thursday in October. You signed your name. You listed no reason. You listed no return date. You left. Silence, real silence, not performed. I was there for 11 years. I aged out at 16. I built everything I have on my own in 2 countries without a family and without a safety net. And 14 years ago, when I was 14 years old, I stood on your porch and read your name off my birth certificate while you told me you didn't have a son. I paused. I'm a daughter. That's the first thing you got wrong. Gemma's hand was flat on the table. Noel was looking at his plate. Adiz was very still beside me. Rajiv said nothing. His jaw was working slightly, the movement of a man deciding between several things to say and discarding each one. The filing, I said, opening the folder. Colleen Ackhafer, my attorney, filed it 10 days ago in family court here in New Jersey. It establishes my legal standing as Rajiv Mehta's biological daughter under state paternity law, which is confirmed by the birth certificate, by DNA testing conducted 6 years ago on a voluntary sample Donna provided. Rajiv's head came up sharply. And by a signed affidavit from Sister Ananya of the Prabhat Children's Home, who is still alive, who is 81 years old, and who wrote down everything she remembered about the morning you brought me in. I slid the first page across the table toward him. Her memory is remarkable. She remembered the yellow dress. If you are still here, you saw what just happened. I need to know you saw it. Rajiv did not pick up the page. He looked at it. His hand was flat on the table, and he looked at the page and he looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years of careful distance and managed performance, what was on his face was not calculation. It was something raw and unmediated and old, the face of a man confronting a thing he had spent 3 decades convincing himself was behind him. You have been planning this, he said. His voice was low. The visits, the birthdays. All of it? I have been building a legal case, yes. The visits were real, Priya is real, those are not the same thing. You used my family, I am your family. The 3 words landed with a weight I had not entirely prepared for, even having said them in my mind 100 times. That is the entire point of the document in front of you. Donna was looking at her hands. Noel found his voice. It was smaller than usual. How long have you known about this, Donna? Longer than I should have, Donna said, without looking up. Gemma, who had been recalibrating silently for the last 4 minutes, said, This is a private matter that should be handled. It stopped being entirely private when Rajiv hired an investigator to look into me, I said. I found out through a phone call. He did not tell Donna he had done it. That is in the filing too. I took a second page from the folder and placed it on the table. This is a summary of his documented assets. Property, retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, prepared by a forensic accountant. All of it is discoverable under the legal process that has already begun. Noel was reading the page without touching it, leaning forward with his hands in his lap. The number at the bottom of page 4, I said, sliding that page across as well, is the figure my attorney has determined represents my equitable share under New Jersey law, not a punitive amount, the legal share. What I would have had access to as a recognized daughter. Gemma looked at the number. Something happened in her face that was not sympathy but was in the neighborhood of recalibration, a woman resorting a room in her mind. Rajiv pushed back from the table, not standing up, just creating distance between himself and the pages. You want money? His voice was flat. I want acknowledgement, I said. The money is what the law says acknowledgement is worth. Those are not the same thing. They are the same thing. They aren't. If I wanted money, I would have called your attorney 2 weeks ago and negotiated a settlement and taken it and gone back to Jersey City. I am sitting at your brother-in-law's dinner table. I am telling you this in front of the people who have been your family, because I want them to know. I want there to be people in your life who heard you sit in this room and have to face what you did. That is what I want. Adiz exhaled once, quietly, beside me. Noel sat back in his chair. Rajiv was looking at the far wall, the look of a man who has run out of the moves he prepared and is now operating without preparation, and it was, despite everything, a human look. I noted it. I did not soften for it because I had spent a very long time not being afforded softness, but I noted it as the thing it was. You can still settle, I said, more quietly. Colleen is available through the end of this week. The number on that page is the legal amount. If we go through the full proceeding, there will be additional costs and considerably more exposure. That is not a threat, it's information. Gemma said to Rajiv with surprising directness, I think you should call your attorney tonight. Rajiv looked at her, then at Noel. Noel did not offer him anything. Not support, not rescue, not the redirection that Noel usually provided reflexively. Noel was looking at the page with the asset summary with an expression that suggested he was doing arithmetic, and the arithmetic was uncomfortable. I was in a very bad place, Rajiv said. It was almost the exact phrase he had used 20 years ago, sitting across from me in his living room the first night I came. The same words. A man with a limited number of explanations, returning to the one he had always used. I know, I said. I've known that since I was 14. It is not the same as it being right. He looked at me then, fully, in a way he had not looked at me across any dinner table or birthday party in 20 years. I do not know what he was looking for. Whatever it was, I did not perform it for him. I sat and I looked back and I let the room be what it was. Donna spoke for the first time in several minutes. Her voice was steady and a little worn, like something that had been used a great deal. She deserves to be in the will, Donna said. She deserves what Priya will have. That is the conversation we should be having. Rajiv looked at his wife. And what crossed his face at that was something I had not seen before in 20 years of studying his face. Not anger, something closer to recognition. The look of a man seeing, for the first time, that the person he had thought was managing the situation alongside him had been making a different calculation entirely. Donna, Priya knows she has a sister, Donna said. She has known for 6 months, and she is in the next room right now. And how you handle the next 10 minutes is how she is going to understand what kind of man her father is. She paused. I think you should think about that before you say anything else. The room was quiet in a way that had texture to it. Noel looked at Gemma. Gemma was looking at the table. Adiz put her hand over mine, briefly, on the tablecloth. One moment. Then she moved it back. I reached into the folder and took out the last page, the one I had saved. I placed it on the table and turned it so it faced Rajiv. It was a photograph, printed on plain paper, which made it look more plain and more true than if it had been framed or mounted. It was the photograph from Sister Ananya's file at the Prabhat Children's Home. A small girl, 3 years old, in a yellow dress with white buttons. Standing in the intake hallway, holding a stuffed rabbit missing one eye, looking at the camera with an expression that was not quite fearful and not quite calm. Something in between. The expression of a child who has been brought somewhere unfamiliar and is waiting to understand what happens next. I watched Rajiv look at it. I had one more thing to say. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Not the way a person looks at something they are seeing for the first time. The way a person looks at something they have been carrying the weight of without ever having to look at it directly, and now it is in front of them on a table in a room full of people, and there is nowhere else to look. His hand moved toward it once and stopped. Donna was watching him from her end of the table. Noel had leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, not in defiance, but in the particular posture of a man who has decided his role in this moment is to stay out of the way of something larger than himself. Gemma was looking at Rajiv with an expression I had not seen from her before, something that was not sympathy exactly, but was an acknowledgement, the look of a woman who has recategorized a situation mid-evening and is still adjusting. Adiz had not moved from beside me. She was present in the way that a person is present when they have decided to be a witness, and they are taking that seriously. I waited. My hands were flat on the table. I had been holding tension in my shoulders for the better part of 2 hours, and I made myself, deliberately, let it go. I had carried the photograph across 2 oceans and 20 years. It had done what I needed it to do. The rest was his. Rajiv looked up from the photograph. His eyes moved to Donna, then to me. She was wearing that dress, he said. His voice was barely above a murmur. I remember it. No one spoke. I told myself I was going to come back. He stopped. He pressed his hands flat on the table the way I had mine, the mirrored gesture of two people who are made from the same biology and have both, it seems, developed the same physical habit of grounding themselves when the ground is unsteady. I told myself 6 months, then I met Donna and 6 months became a year and a year became, he stopped again. I know that is not an explanation. It isn't, I said, I know. Gemma said quietly to Noel, take Tobias out back. It was not a suggestion. Noel got up without comment, and I heard him go to the kitchen and say something to Tobias in a low voice, and the back door opened and closed. The 5 of us who remained in the room were the 5 of us who needed to be there. The settlement, I said. I want you to hear directly from me what I am asking for, not through attorneys, from me. I touched the page with the number on it. This figure represents my legal share of your documented assets as calculated under New Jersey paternity law. It includes the property in Edison, the retirement accounts, and the investment portfolio. It does not include Donna's personal assets, which are separate. It does not touch the college fund Donna established for Priya. I paused. I set that boundary specifically. Priya is not part of this. What is between us is between us. Donna looked at me with something that I did not fully have a name for. It was not gratitude exactly. It was the look of a woman who has been watching a situation she helped create and is seeing, for the first time, a version of its resolution that she had not allowed herself to believe was possible. Rajiv was looking at the number on the page. You could fight it, I said. Your attorney has already told you the legal standing is solid. The birth certificate, the DNA, Sister Ananya's affidavit, those are not contestable. The DNA sample Donna provided was voluntary and legal. The affidavit is witnessed and notarized. The only question is whether you want this to go through a full court proceeding, which will be public record, or whether you want to settle in the next 2 weeks and have it resolved quietly. I folded my hands. I have no preference. I want what is mine. How you choose to deliver it is up to you. Rajiv picked up the page with the number. He read it. He put it back down. Then he said, What do you want from me that isn't on this page? I looked at him. I want you to say it. In this room with these people as witnesses, that you left me, that I am your daughter, that what you did was wrong, not explained, not justified, wrong. A long silence. Adiz was very still beside me. Donna was looking at her husband with an expression that was not a demand and was not a plea. It was simply attention. Full, unflinching attention. The look of a woman waiting to find out who her husband actually was when there was nowhere left to hide. Rajiv put both hands flat on the table. He looked at the photograph of a 3-year-old girl in a yellow dress. I left you, he said. Each word was separate and deliberate, the way words are when a person is choosing them with the awareness that they cannot be unchosen afterward. You are my daughter. What I did was wrong. The room absorbed it. I breathed out slowly. I had been holding something in my chest for 31 years and it did not dissolve in a single moment because nothing real dissolves in a single moment, but something in it shifted. Something became, for the first time, the past tense. Priya's voice came from the kitchen doorway. We had not heard her come back in. She was standing with one hand on the doorframe, her phone still face down, and she was looking at her father. Baba. Her voice was 14, clear and direct, and not yet worn down by the habit of softening things for adults. Did you know she was looking for you? Rajiv looked at his younger daughter. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. And you didn't tell her to come? No. Priya looked at him for another moment with the particular moral clarity of a 14-year-old who has not yet learned to excuse the adults in her life for things that are not excusable. Then she crossed the room and sat down in the chair that Noel had vacated, next to me, and she did not say anything else. She simply sat there, present, choosing her position in the room without being asked to. That, more than anything else that happened that evening, was the thing that stayed with me afterward. Rajiv's attorney called Colleen the following Monday morning. The negotiation lasted 4 days. On Thursday afternoon, in Colleen's office in Newark, Rajiv made us sign a settlement agreement that transferred to me a sum that I am not going to state in full here, but which represented the legal figure from page 4 of the summary document, reduced by 12% in exchange for a compressed timeline and a mutual confidentiality clause that covered the proceeding, but explicitly did not cover my right to identify myself as his daughter. That clause was Colleen's addition. She told me it was the most important paragraph in the document. She was right. He signed. I signed. Colleen and his attorney signed as witnesses. The whole thing took 40 minutes. Rajiv did not look at me when we were in the same room. He looked at the documents and at his attorney and at a point slightly above my left shoulder. I did not need him to look at me. He had already done the thing I needed him to do, in a room in South Brunswick on a Saturday night, in front of 5 witnesses, with a photograph of a yellow dress on the table between us. That was the part that mattered. The rest was paperwork. The will amendment came 6 weeks later, through his attorney to Colleen, without drama and without a phone call. It named me as an equal beneficiary alongside Priya. I had not asked for this specifically. It was Donna who had apparently made clear to Rajiv that it was non-negotiable from her side. I found out about it through Colleen, who sent me the relevant page with a note that said simply, "Donna Farrow Mehta is a formidable woman. I agree with that assessment. Rajiv and Donna are still married as of now. I do not fully understand that, and I have decided it is not mine to understand." Donna called me 3 weeks after the settlement, and we talked for an hour about nothing in particular, Mumbai and Philadelphia, and whether Priya's interest in debate was going to survive her first tournament loss, and at the end of the call she said, "I'm glad you came back." I said I was too. I meant it without reservation, and also with full awareness that it had cost both of us something to get here, and that the cost was not equal, and that we were both choosing to proceed anyway. That is not the same as everything being resolved. It is its own kind of resolution. Noel has been carefully normal with me at the 2 family gatherings that have occurred since, which is his way of saying he has landed on the side of accepting the situation. Gemma has been more than carefully normal. She invited me to a dinner at her house last month, just the 2 of us plus Donna, which was an unmistakable social signal from a woman who communicates primarily through social signals. I went. The food was good. She did not apologize for the comment about the foundation, but she also did not repeat it, and she asked me 3 questions about my work that were genuine rather than assessments. I considered that a form of apology and left it there. Adiz texted me the morning after the Saturday dinner. The text said, "I have been waiting for that evening for 4 years. Donna needed a witness who wasn't family. I'm glad I was there." I texted back, "So am I. We have had dinner twice since in Philadelphia, and she is the kind of person I intend to know for a long time. I am in Jersey City now. The American branch of my practice has 3 clients and is adding a 4th, a logistics firm in New Jersey that was referred to me by one of my Mumbai clients, which is how referral networks are supposed to work and almost never do until you have spent a decade building them carefully. My apartment has a view of the water that I did not specifically look for, but that I have become attached to in the way you become attached to a thing that was present during an important chapter. The stuffed rabbit with one eye is on my bookshelf. Sister Ananya sent it to me last year, with a note saying she had kept it in my file for 31 years because she had always believed I would come back for it. The note said that the girl who left it had become someone worth knowing. I read that note 4 times and then put it in the same notebook I have been keeping since I was 12 years old. Next to the address, I had written 3 times in careful handwriting, next to the name of a Tuesday in April when I boarded a plane and stopped waiting for someone to come and find me. Priya came to stay with me for a weekend in February. She slept on my couch and ate an extraordinary amount of cereal and spent most of Saturday morning asking me questions about Mumbai and whether I thought she could do a gap year there after secondary school. I told her I thought she could do most things she decided to do. She said, in the offhand tone of a teenager stating a thing that is not new information to her, "I always knew you were real, you know, even before Mum told me. Baba got weird whenever someone mentioned India." I told her that was very perceptive. She shrugged. "I'm good at debates," she said, and went back to her cereal. I am not going to tell you I have fully made peace with 31 years. I am not sure peace is the right word for what I have with those years. What I have is an accurate account of them, and a life I built because of them and despite them, and a 14-year-old sister who calls me Diddy and argues about gap year logistics and has my father's jaw. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. So here is what I want to know, and I genuinely want to know it. Not the easy version, the version where I am clearly right and he is clearly wrong. I want the harder question. I waited. I built. I showed up at that dinner with documents and a photograph and 20 years of patience, and I made him say it out loud in front of people who knew him. I got what I came for, but I also kept the visits going for years while knowing what I was planning. I sat at his table and ate his food and watched Priya grow up and built a relationship with Donna that was real. And I did all of it while carrying something that none of them fully knew about. Was what I did justice, or was it something more complicated than justice? I want to know what you think.